Jill, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm currently the Chief Information Security Officer for Blackline, a company that does financial SaaS solutions. We're based out of the Los Angeles area. I've been here almost 3 years now as the CISO, running the information security team. Prior to that, I've had a couple different roles as CISOs at a private equity company. I was also at Mattel for a few years and British Telecom, BT Global Services for about 10 years. But my claim to fame, I suppose, and the interesting part was I was an FBI special agent for about 3.5 years, and I worked cybercrime. And I prior to that, I was in the computer science field. And when I had the chance to apply for a special agent position, it was my lifelong dream, and I was super excited. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just wanted to be, have the FBI credentials. And when I got there, they realized I had a computer background. So the obvious choice was to put me in cybercrime. And so that kind of is how I ended up in this world. Once I started doing it, I realized I was quite passionate, and since then, I've just continued to pursue it, and I've really enjoyed my career path.
Is that what you got you to go from the FBI to do the kind of the CISO role as your experiences there and prior?
Yeah, and I would say, it was a bittersweet for me because it was a lifelong dream to be an FBI agent. And I planned to, retire. I already had, 11 years in the federal government working in the, computer science side of the house. So I planned just to stay in the federal government and retire. But unfortunately, the pay wasn't great,
Yeah.
in the federal government. And then when you're doing cybercrime, back then there were no CISO, so it was pretty early days. So I'd usually go whenever we'd have a victim company in the area. I'd interview the CEO or the COO, somebody, the CIO. And as I'm talking to them, trying to help them figure out what's going on, they're like, "Man, we could use someone like you." So, eventually, it's like the teasers started getting like a little more realistic, and I realized I could probably do more for the industry. On the private industry side, there wasn't as many, requirements and bureaucracy and treaties and things that were keeping me from being able to chase down and find the hackers. And my knowledge and expertise and training I got through the FBI, I knew would be very valuable in private industry. So it was a very hard decision. My supervisor retired, and I ended up following him to Exodus at the time. And, I don't regret it, although the FBI did give me a safety net to come back if I changed my mind. But once I left, I was very happy in being able to at least help the FBI find the hackers
Hmm.
from the private industry side of the house.
So how has the CISO role kind of evolved since you entering the field and what it is now?
Yeah, I mean, for the beginning, there, like I said, there was no CISO. It was really a CIO was probably the one that would have some security people, and they started off as, let's say, firewall
Yeah.
engineers or something, just inheriting the roles. And then as it got more and more visibility, they started increasing the visibility of the role. And once they made it a C-level position, I think that's really when you started seeing, a lot more individuals across the business looking to say, this is something that I would like to be involved in. So you have people from the financial side, you have people from business side, COOs come in. A lot of CIOs might decide to divert into cybersecurity. So what I've seen is, there's not a lot. I came up strictly through computer science and through security. That's not always the case. And I think you could debate, what's the right path. I don't think there's a right or wrong path, to be honest. It's just really about passion. But today, what you see, which is great, is there's so much visibility. I present to the board quarterly. I have a lot of exposure into our, executive committee. Talk regularly with the CEOs about, how we're addressing some of the security threats and cyber risk in general. And so it's really elevated into a true C-level position where you get that kind of access and exposure.
And when you first started, was there much partnership with the board, or were you almost more? Because I've heard a number of CISOs that they had almost a more adversarial role
Oh,
with the board. Is that we want to do this, or we need the money to do this, and the board was, nope, we're
yeah.
not going to give you the money. We don't think security is important.
Yes, in the early days, I mean, first of all, you weren't even invited to the meetings. You would brief the CIO in case he got a couple questions on security, and he'd go represent you. And then what I found was interesting is that some of the boards in the early days were very interested in the topic. They thought it was kind of cool and sexy, I guess. And so when I would be in the board meeting and I would see them all on their, phones just and not really paying attention. And then as soon as I started talking, they all put their phones down and were very interested in, what was going on. I think they just wanted to go home and tell stories, maybe. But there were times when, you really had to make a case because if you're really good at your job, nothing bad happens. So
Yeah.
it's hard to tell a story. And when something bad happens, you don't have credibility to go ask for more money, right? So you've kind of failed in their eyes. So it was really hard to to be able to balance that out. Explaining like the reason nothing bad happens is because I'm making the right investments, and you're giving me the right budget to do that. As we sit today, that's not the problem. As a matter of fact, there's many times when, the board is like, do you have enough budget? Are you getting the right level of support? And is there more that we can do to help you make sure we drive cyber risk down to the right levels? So the story's changed over time for sure.
So what's the challenge now? Because you said that, the getting the money wasn't the problem before. Now that you've got the money, what's the new problem?
So I think the new problem is complexity. Like there's so many different parts and pieces. In our organization, we obviously have products. We have a SaaS solution, and that's really kind of a separate entity. And it's very complex. We have multiple products on multiple clouds, and then we have the corporate infrastructure, which is also very critical. So I think the complexities of being able to manage across all those pieces and coordinate with the CIO and the CTO and make sure they're aligned and they're not getting out ahead of me in
Yeah.
some of the things they're trying to accomplish. Just staying aligned with them and being able to. I always like to refer to the security and the CISO role as kind of the watchman on the watchtower. And if we're not standing up and looking out into the future and getting
Yeah.
really connected with our business partners and making sure we know where they're going, then it's hard for us to be able to budget for the right projects, the right tooling, and the right investments. So I think for me now, I can get the budget if I need it, and I can make the case. I just always trying to figure out like where do I need to invest next?
Yeah.
That's the big question.
Some of the challenges is that just more and more things are becoming internet connected and more services are in the cloud. So it's not as much under your control.
Yeah, it's very much that. When it was in the data center, it was easy to put a perimeter, right? And so you can just you can start with the firewalls and work your way in. That's not the case. Now with the cloud, there's so many different pieces that are constantly, connecting all by itself, and servers come up and down, and you don't really know what you're protecting on some days. And so it's a constant battle to just keep the perimeters and understand what's your external facing threat risk and attack surface. And so I think for me, and the team, we're always trying to stay. We have very good working relationships with both the corporate IT organization. I actually report into the CIO, but also I work closely with our cloud engineering and operations teams to make sure that anything they're doing and they're thinking about growing or changing the way they implement new systems, that we're right aligned with them. And I talk a lot about shift left. We always have to be, very early in that
Yeah.
development in pipeline. So, it's we're getting there, but the complexities continue to add to that. And I think just there's so much connectivity happening in so many different parts of the business that you have to be, really making sure you're monitoring all those different external touch points.
Yeah, I kind of look back at my own business, and when I first started, part of the fun of doing what I was doing was I was hand coding and doing everything myself. All the network stuff was done by myself. All the programming was done by me, and that was really fun. But I realized to scale and to be more effective with my time, I started having to rely on more public sources for things. Okay, well, there's this library that does, rather than me to writing something from scratch, here's a library that does that. Okay, I've now introduced an attack vector into my system because it's not something I have control over anymore.
Right. Yes. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a little bit of I think, Bruce Schneier, used to work with him, years ago, and I think he kind of referred to it as outsourcing trust.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you do have to know that the vendors and the, your supply chain are companies and products and tools that you can trust, because you're bringing them in expecting them to do a certain role and not to increase your vulnerabilities and instead reduce that. But a little bit of that comes with trust, but it also comes with the whole trust but verify, right? You do all your checks and balances and make sure that that you don't have some unknown holes out there, and then you got to monitor for vulnerabilities for all those other
Yeah.
partners you have in the supply chain. So yeah.
So how does this, from a CISO's perspective, they're touching more and more parts of the business and are getting more and more responsibility. Do they have the teams and the talent to be able to manage all this, or is this an industry where, you know, sure, I can get a talented person, but now I'm robbing it from, my part, one someone who does the same sort of thing. They're one of my clients. I'm, pulling in one of their people onto my team. Now they've got a gap, and there's no one to fill that gap. Are there enough
Yeah.
people out there to fulfill the roles?
I think right now there's a huge skills gap, and I think there's just not enough people coming into the cybersecurity industry, and part of that is some of the stress that you will
Yeah,
probably talk about later. There's a lot of folks that come out of maybe the colleges, and they're thinking about their career paths, and they're reading about this cybersecurity and ransomware attacks, and the stress and people working nights and weekends and not having enough resourcing and
yeah,
budget, and they're like, maybe I'll just go into cloud. That sounds cool or something.
yeah,
So I think what's happened is we just don't have the youth coming out of colleges with that kind of mentality of, look, if I get in there, I think I can do a job where I can make it better, and I can find opportunities to automate things so we don't have so much stress. Instead people are like, they'd rather just find a different path that's not going to be so stressful and cause them to lose weekends and evenings with their families. So that's the biggest issue I see. What I'm doing here, to be honest, is when you talk about stealing, I'm kind of stealing from, not stealing because it's a relationship, but there's people in the corporate IT side, the cloud engineering, even our prod ops, and some of the development teams that see our AppSec team. They work closely with my teams for application security or security operations, and they're like, hey, I love cloud, but this security stuff seems cool. And so I end up transferring some internal resources, which is great because they come with all the knowledge of how
yeah,
things are connected and work. And now I've just got to train them up on some of the security tooling. And it's such an easier path. But then I do leave, I leave gaps in other places in the
yeah.
business where I have to keep my relationship with those leaders to make sure they don't get frustrated that I'm stealing all their talent. So it's a balancing act. And I think we just have to, figure out how do we get more talent into the cybersecurity space at a younger age, early in their career path, so they can start building on that.
Yeah. So you alluded a little bit to kind of burnout, nights, weekends, a time away from families. Like, why is that happening at the CISO level? Normally, you don't think of the CEO. He goes to Cabo. He comes in, has a rally session with the salespeople, and then he goes out golfing with his buddies. Why is the CISO not getting to do that kind of fun stuff?
Yeah, I think that, well, part of it is, the CISOs really are such a hands-on leader. At least I know I am. I've been doing security forever. I'm extremely passionate about it. And I've been through so many, incidents in my career where I have a little bit, more expertise and experience, and I can help calm folks. But the other thing is that the executive committees and the boards expect the CISO to be right in the mix of it, and they want real-time updates. They want to make sure that everybody's working in the right direction. You've got the right teams, the right support, the right outsourced consulting capabilities. And so you end up being really I've been in situations where I'm that communicator, and I'm communicating down to the teams that I run. I'm communicating across to my peers, and I'm communicating up to the executives and the board, all in a single day.
Yeah.
Because I'm that one link that has all of the different parts and pieces, and I don't want to distract my engineers and my the people on the ground doing the work from being able to continue to monitor and make sure if we have an incident that they're on top of it. And I've been able to articulate over the years, learn to articulate technical problems into very
Yeah.
business level conversations. So there's really not many people in the organization that can do that job as well as a CISO. Then you add on all the new SEC disclosure requirements and the responsibilities that the CISO carries for the company and as part of that, reporting. And I think you have a much increased pressure on the CISO to be a bit of everything in the middle of those crises.
So, what are some of the things that a CISO can do to mitigate some of the burnout?
For me personally, I mean, I think the thing is that not everything can be a five-alarm fire,
Yeah.
right? So I shouldn't be talking about fire, and we're going through out here in LA, but I think what happens is every incident is like, sky is falling for some security organizations, and actually for folks outside of cybersecurity, they have an incident and they think, oh my gosh, this is the big one. We have to be able to, very quickly identify and quantify what is the impact of this particular incident, and does it require me raising it up to the level of bringing everybody out, if it's evenings or weekends,
Yeah.
bringing people online, or can we manage this through our standard security operations, queue and monitoring capabilities. So I try not to overreact, and a lot of that comes with years of experience and knowing, when to start escalating. But that when you do escalate, that you keep the right tone, right? So it's about making sure that, look, it's this should be a lot of muscle memory here. We shouldn't be doing things that are completely outside of our comfort zone. And so I try to keep that calm, emotional, level-headed view. So when I come into calls, I try to bring that, look, we have urgency, but at the same time, this is what you do every day. Don't overthink it. Keep it simple, get to the bottom of it. Let's manage this. So the CISO plays a very critical role in maintaining the attitude and the emotional stress level of the team as well as the company. And as long as I'm calm and I'm handling it well, my team is like, okay, we're all right. And then my leadership is like, okay, Jill has this. So I think it's really something I have to learn how to balance. And again, it comes with been there, done that kind of
Yeah.
experience.
I think the firefighting analogy is actually pretty good in a sense. And
Mm.
we're both in the Southern California area when we're recording this. There's some big fires going on, which is why we're hesitant to use the word fire. Um, but you see it with firefighters when they roll up to a scene, they're urgent, they're moving quickly, but they're not panicking. It's like, no, we know what to do. We know how to put out this fire. Hey, it's getting bigger. We just need to call some more people in. It's very, what they're doing is very organized and thoughtful. And it sounds like that's the way we need to approach our incident response as well.
That's exactly right. I mean, years ago when I would, talk about security, we talked about, having, when we talk about outsourcing managed services stuff, we talk about the fact that, not every company can afford to have their own fire department, but every company needs to have their security team trained up to react and respond to fires.
Yeah.
And so I think, that's where the muscle memory comes in. That's where whenever we have a small incident, we talk about the lessons learned because a small incident's not that different than a big incident. It's just the level of stress and visibility that comes with it. So that's creating the muscle memory to say, look, you've already been through this. You did this. It's maybe a little bit bigger or maybe externally facing potentially, but you've already been doing this day in and day out. Let's just go into the scene. Let's be prompt and with some urgency, but at the same time, like you say, not panicked and not, stressed out because that's when your brain doesn't work well in a crisis mode. And I think you have to be able to be really, feel like I know how to do this. I just need to revert back to my muscle memory and allow myself to work through this as if it was, just an everyday event. And so I think that's what I try to do. As a matter of fact, I call it, you said you like stories. I love telling stories too. That's my favorite thing. So I have a friend of mine who was telling me because I live in a canyon in the North LA area, and her and her husband love motorcycles, and they would drive this canyon, and we would go in and out of it. And she's like, my husband always says a beautiful thing about riding a motorcycle is you can straighten out the curves.
Yeah.
And so you, instead of doing the hard, back and forth like you have to in a car and stuff, you can kind of, on a motorcycle, you can kind of just lean into it And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, that's exactly what I need to be for this company is I need to help straighten out the curve. So we shouldn't be on roller coaster rides. You
Yeah.
can't get too high, but you also aren't going to get too low. So let's just, straighten out the curves, keep it balanced. And that's where I can bring my years of experience and really, my personality and style to a situation and help keep things not going over the top and not getting on the roller coaster ride, which is exactly where burnout exists, all that level of stress.
Are there some incident response kind of processes and flow that you've kind of developed that helps you straighten out the curves?
I think part of it is that, again, it's like every time we have a small incident, treat it as if it could have been a big one. And let's learn from it. Let's remind ourselves that this is exactly what we would do in the middle of an incident. So we're practicing our incident response process all the time. And when you work in a company that has, we're providing SaaS solutions, there's always little incidents that are
Yeah.
happening in the background that aren't necessarily security. They may be operational, but we get called into those and we monitor them and we watch how other teams handle incidents and how they manage through it and their calmness. And sadly, the more you do those, the better you get at them.
Yeah.
The key for us is always like figuring out like how did it happen and why did it happen so we can be proactive in the future. But you have to learn from all those small incidents and treat them in a way that is a learning opportunity as well. And so that's what we've done here is I do a lot of after the event we sit down and we talk about lessons learned and what we could have done better and how we can apply what we learned here to future events.
Is there a specific kind of conceptual lesson learned that was a big aha moment for you and your team?
Um, I think in general, we sometimes don't see the incidents for what they are fast enough. And so what I like for my security operations folks is to, when in doubt, kind of pull the alarm to get, some of the more senior people in the team involved quickly because, there's this window of time
Mm-hmm.
when you can really manage and mitigate an incident. And so I think, the sooner you get people who are very experienced, because obviously if you're, doing your, security operations, you may not have as much experience as, let's say, the director of the SecOps team or, the CISO. And so don't be afraid to pull the alarm bell. I'm not going to penalize you for, a false alarm. What I'm going to be frustrated is if you saw something, it didn't say it thinking it was no big deal, and now I've got to deal with the ramifications of that. So I think just being, having it open and not, punishing the team or scolding them if they like are too quick to react. I'd
Yeah.
rather them, quickly react and just let's get eyes on it very quickly and go, no, 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 it's a, nothing big. We can go back to our normal routine. But in the event we do find something, I think the sooner that we identify it and start reacting, responding, usually the better things turn out for us.
Is it the sort of thing where the tier one, the frontline people are just in most organizations, it tends to be whether it's security or even outside of security, the tier one, the first people, the sharp edge of the sword are usually have the least amount of experience.
That is the case. I mean, it's anybody doing 24/7 on call duty, they're usually they feel like it's a punishment and
Yeah.
they've got to earn their wings, so to speak. So I think yeah, that is the fact. But what I'm really keen on doing is making sure that we always have tier two, tier three people sitting on the side, able to help and the right culture and environment for them to learn under, so they don't feel like they're out there on their own. And one of the things that I actually do, to really help my team is I do a one-to-one with everybody on my team at least once a quarter. In
Hmm.
some cases, if people want to meet with me once a month. I have a team of like 30 people right now. And it's, I can do it, which is
Yeah.
nice. And I like spending, a good focused half an hour talking to them, not just about work, but also about their personal life, about how they handle things. And I try to give them stories and mentor them on some of the things that I've been through and what I've learned and how they can apply it maybe in their future and their career pathing. So I think it's really important that they don't feel like it's a big deal to call the CISO, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm just one of them. I love this stuff. I'm passionate and I'm geeky about it. And so I think that creates an environment where they're not afraid to pull the alarm. And then over time, they're learning. And so at some point they're able to do their own analysis and maybe just do a second check with a tier three person. But creating that environment, a safe environment for them to make mistakes in if they need to or overreact, I think is the environment that I like to create.
Yeah, you definitely don't want your frontline people afraid to raise the alarm or ask for help.
That's right. Yes, they need to be understand that we hired him into that role because we knew that there's a growth opportunity. And I like bringing in, more junior engineers. I like having folks with, anywhere from entry level to 3 to 5 years experience. But then I have a couple seniors that I know have been through the firefights and they know what to do. And so, having that mixture, it allows for a career pathing. I don't have too many seniors that are like a
Yeah.
ceiling and blocking them from promotion. At the same time, they're surrounded by other people that are at their level and they're learning together. So it makes it a little easier for them to not just learn on their own, but learn from what their peers are doing.
Do you find that the kind of the new hire, less experienced people come with a different approach that maybe your more seasoned people didn't have because they've kind of grown up in a different time of connectivity?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, most of us in more senior roles, we didn't grow up with cloud. We were all on-prem data centers,
Yeah.
we had firewalls on the egress points. And so we have a different world. And so, yeah, I like bringing in folks who have, especially if they've had some experience in cloud in general. I think they understand how the cloud works in a way that maybe we've had to learn. We've kind of had to, backwards learn it, if you will, on a security front, jumping in and saying, okay, this isn't a firewall, but it acts like a firewall. And, they don't have that reference point like
Yeah.
we do. And so I love bringing in the folks that are, come from a different background. I always tell people, look, I'm a problem solver. That's what I do. And I can solve any problem. I tell them, you bring me a problem, I'm going to solve it. But that doesn't mean my solution is the right way. It
Yeah.
just means that I'm going to, engineers can solve things 1,000 different ways. But you may have a solution that's actually a much better solution than I could think of because your exposure and your access is different than mine. So solve your problems. And if it's, something that we can learn from, we should learn how to, put that into effect. If it turns out that maybe it's not exactly 100%, then you can talk to others and see if there's a better way to solve those problems. So, learning how to solution, and learning that they can be a problem solver at their level. They don't have to escalate just to solve a problem. I think empowers them to be able to think more outside the box.
Yeah, I know when I managed a group of developers, I was always really inspired by by the way different people solved things differently. That
Yeah.
someone would hit a roadblock and they'd find a solution. It's like, oh my God, like I wouldn't have even have thought of that solution to this
Yes.
issue.
Yeah,
Um,
I've had that in the middle of an incident, and it's again, I like to be on these incident calls just sometimes just to hear how people think. I've always liked to study how people react in a crisis. You have the fight or flight, and you always want to know who's going to fight and who's going to run for the hills kind of thing. Because if you don't know and you put the wrong people in the wrong places, then you're gonna have problems. But I've seen some of the most creative out of the box thinking because they're like, hey, what if we did this? And it's like, oh my God, you see all these light bulbs going off. You're like, wow, that's really ingenious. And then you see that person, you're like, this is a person who really can think well when they're under a little bit of stress
yeah,
and in a crisis mode. And I think, then you share those stories and let people know, look, it wasn't the seniors, it wasn't the people with all the experience. It was that guy who just has his fingers on the keyboard all day and he was like, come up with this crazy idea. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so simple and clean. Let's just do it. So you're right. It's kind of fun to watch engineers solve problems like
yeah.
that.
So were there any incidents in your career that, uh, as the incident was kind of unfolding, you thought, "Oh my gosh, like this is the big one. This is going to be the gnarly. We're going to get in trouble with everybody."
Hmm.
That actually turned out to not be an incident.
Uh, I think there's been a couple where, we've had ransomware get into our environment. And there's several companies back. We had a ransomware attack that hit our finance department. It was towards the end of the quarter,
Oh,
which,
yeah,
the first thing that we do when we see any kind of ransomware in the environment is we just start unplugging things. And I say that in a, in the physical terms, but there's a lot of, with the data centers in the cloud, you just start disconnecting things because you want to make sure you isolate and not have it spread.
Yeah.
And we literally had people, a team in the building, that were running to the finance floor and just grabbing laptops off desks and just unplugging them. And they're all like, everybody's very upset with me, because, they're trying to close the books. And I'm like, I'm sorry, we can't afford to have this, get across our environment and jump into production side of the house. But the fast acting that we did and the ability to quickly respond, and clean up those devices, we were able to, it was a non-event. Nobody actually knew about it. We were down for maybe a couple hours while we just cleaned off some of the finance machines, and we went and scanned all the servers. But ultimately, we might have lost maybe a few hours of data. I think that got overwritten. But it turned out to be, nothing. And it taught us some really good muscle memory because they got used to now everybody knew that they could react and respond. We had to call a lot of people. And so I refer to them kind of like they do in the, in airplane mode is a near miss.
Yeah.
Or it could have been disastrous and one of the worst days on the, in your life. And all of a sudden, you just kind of veer off and miss each other, and it's just an interesting story to tell. So there's always a few of those out there. That's the ones you prefer.
Yeah.
So.
Any stories of unexpected like someone outside of your organization says, "Hey, I think there's a security issue here, or there's something weird going on," and I'll give you time to think, and I'll tell a story.
Okay. Sure.
So I run whatismyipaddress.com, and I get lots of people saying, "Oh, I get support tickets saying, oh, you've got." I want to report a vulnerability with your platform, and it's an earth shattering vulnerability. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is it? And they're like, oh well, your DMARC record is set to quarantine, not reject. I'm like, okay, that's okay, yeah, that's not a real issue. But I got an email from someone saying, why is your website doing crypto mining in my browser? And I thought, I'm not doing that. I know there's like ad plugins that would do that. I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not doing that. And it came in on the weekend, and I was like, do I want to spend the time looking at this or not? And I thought, okay, I better look at it and do a little deep diving. And it's like, yeah, when I'm on my website in the browser, there's crypto mining going on. Like,
Yeah.
and my first thought was, oh my gosh, someone has compromised my certain one of my platforms. And so I start at the server level. I'm like, okay, there's nothing going on here. No files have been modified. I'm like, well, how can it be doing crypto mining if nothing's been modified? Because the guy was like, oh, it just started, yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking further, but there's nothing anywhere in my code, nothing about the crypto mining. Mm-hmm. Turns out that a library that was being like 3 or 4 partners down on some stack that had been compromised, and they got a cryptocurrency miner incorporated in their code, and it kind of rolled up to the chain. So it was just a matter of like, disable this, okay, disable that, and then it went away. I'm like, okay, well, that's where it is. Mm-hmm. So it was one of those. I wouldn't have even thought to look for that at the moment, but some random person was nice enough to notice that something was weird and reported it.
Yeah, I've definitely had that occur. I mean, we at a previous company we had a bug bounty program that and bug bounty programs are very specific normally to a certain product or a certain URL, but some of these researchers will like push outside the envelope, and we've had reports of someone that started like looking at maybe our corporate sites and found some unusual activity. And at first it's like, hey, that's out of scope. It's like, oh my gosh, this is actually extremely important information. So much so that, I would start having, because I think sometimes when a researcher gets an email or, a call from a CISO, it probably makes them feel pretty valued, So I was like, I'm going to talk to this individual and find out, first of all, are they legitimate? Are they messing with us? So I've had a couple occasions when I just get on, I'll email and then I say, can I talk to you on the phone? And we'll get on a call together and I'll tell them my background with the FBI and some of my cases, and I start building a rapport with them. And actually they end up being individuals that, I have a relationship when they're like, hey, if you want to do a private bug bounty, I know a lot of good researchers that we can do with you. So you build a relationship, but sometimes it's those types of events that, it is a blind spot. We're looking at so many things. We're looking at, really big problems. We're looking at our production environments. Sometimes it's the little sites, like somebody turned on a server that they needed access to, and it's running somewhere you didn't even know
Yeah.
existed. And some random person finds it, and then you go and chase it down, and you find out, wow, I didn't even know that site was there, and I didn't know that those particular ports were open and exposing us to some kind of leaks. But so yeah, for sure you have those, and that's why I'm really big on bug bounty programs. I also keep a very strong relationship with the FBI still. I'm part of FBI InfraGard, and I reach out to the cybercrime supervisor here in the Los Angeles area, just so I have that relationship, because you never know where the data is going to come. Sometimes the call will go to the FBI before it comes to us directly. And I think there's such an important, piece of intelligence that you get from those types of contacts.
Yeah, I think that's the phone call you don't want to get. Hey, this is Agent Bob from the FBI. Can we talk?
Yes, 100%. That's the bad day, and it's usually Friday, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're about ready to go, start your weekend. It's like, oh no. So yeah, but the good news is sometimes you get information and
Yeah.
intelligence that hasn't gone out to the public yet. They might have an undercover operation or something going on that they can feed you information to get ahead of the curve, and so that's why it's really important to have that relationship, because they trust you and they know you'll react and respond appropriately. But yeah, that there's always blind spots in every company, and you should never just get like I don't want to hear from them. If you
Yeah.
get these emails, I always read them and I'm like, I wonder, is that legit? So I'll go have my team do a little digging and make sure it's not legitimate concern.
Yeah, that's always interesting. So, is there anything that we've missed in talking about? I know we talked a little bit about the talent gap. Is there do you see any potential solutions for talent gap?
I what I think we need to start doing personally is I think we need to start introducing cybersecurity at the high school level. And I know it's complicated, but there's a lot of computer classes. There's a lot of training that goes on at the high school level now. Most students, I think, all have either computers or iPads. They have
Yeah.
Gmail accounts. They're working online, using cloud environments. I really think there's an opportunity to get in earlier, because once you get into college age, you might already have decided what you want to pursue. And if you've not been exposed to something like cybersecurity, you probably don't even know what kind of environment. You probably think it's either too complicated, or you could never do it, or it sounds scary and you don't want that kind of lifestyle. But if you can introduce it maybe at earlier in high school age, students, maybe they'll start thinking about an interesting career path. I know for me, I love what I do for a living. People ask me, are you ever going to retire? I'm like, I don't know why I would. It's not heavy lifting. And, as long as I can, keep my brain sharp, I think, I can do this job forever. And the longer you do it, the better you get at it, and the more muscle memory it is, and the less time it takes. It's like anything, I don't have to work nearly as hard as I did, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
because it's very natural. So I'm hoping that we can start, really encouraging those types of programs into the high schools, and maybe early and junior colleges and stuff, where people that are still not deciding what they want to do with their career have a chance to pursue something, or at least entertain the idea of moving into cybersecurity. I mean, we have tons of open positions, not enough people to fill them. I think the salaries are really good, and most of these jobs, I'm perfectly happy having remote workers. They don't need to come into an office all the time. We can do our job sitting at, in our homes, as long as we're dedicated and focused. And so hopefully, we can start, filling up some of those skills gaps as we move forward.
Yeah, I think the fully remote has probably made a number of listeners' ears perk up and go, wait, what?
Yes, right. I love working remote. I mean, it was a change in my career. And I think I actually put in a lot more hours at home
Yeah.
because it's here for me. So there's a, there's a pro and a con to it, but for me as a CISO, as an employer and a leader, I want to make sure, that I get the most of my team. And if they're in an environment where they can pop on at 7 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night because they're available, there's a lot of benefits to that too.
Yeah, my wife is 90% remote now. And like you, she works more hours, but she's less stressed out.
Right. Exactly.
And she's
Yep.
like, "Oh, look, when I need to talk to somebody in the UK or in Australia,
Mhm.
I could just, I could make that phone call and I don't feel like I have to stay at the office and wait till they're available or get in early so I can catch them."
That's right. Yeah, it's a much better, work experience, at least for me. And I think, if you have the right, self-discipline, it works very well. I think that's the only thing. You just have to be very disciplined because there's always distractions, especially at home. But yeah, I love working, remotely, and it's been, for me a godsend.
Yep. Are there any particular resources that you think would be of value to CISOs that you have available?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. Not off the top of my head. I mean, I obviously am a member of FBI InfraGard. I think it's really important. I think it's super important that CISOs be, connected in with a local, CISO, events and activities and groups if they have them. There's so much that I learned from other CISOs in the Southern California area. I'm like, I don't know what tool to use here. There's so many good ones out there. And I'll talk to some CISOs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I tried this, I tried that, but this is the one I like. So it saved me so much time
Hmm.
and I don't have time and money to make mistakes on investments. And so having a group of individuals that you can reach out to anytime there's questions, I think that's really important. So yeah, I think membership in those types of groupings would certainly bring value, and LinkedIn is always a good place to go as well. So I'm always on there a lot and make sure I reach out to other CISOs that are going through similar issues that I am.
And it's got to be interesting. I think CISOs is one of those roles where there's uh, not a lot of competition against your competitors, so to speak.
Yeah, right.
Like
So we're all in it together, right?
you're all doing the same work. It doesn't matter if we're selling competing products or not.
Yeah, you're
That's
right.
not what we as a CISO do. We just trying to keep our companies safe. And even if the CEOs are adversaries, the CISOs are going to be good friends.
That's exactly right. And it's a small community, it's a small circle. And when you help someone out in the community, they will reciprocate that for sure. And you're right. We don't, we're all fighting the same battles. And if we're in the same industry and we're competitors, we're probably facing the same hackers and,
Yeah,
attack methods. So by having that relationship and it not being adversarial, I think it really brings value. And I don't have any problem sharing as long as it doesn't, compromise any of our intellectual properties. But for the most part, this is just common stuff out there. And if we can help each other do better, I think that's what we want to do.
that's awesome. If people want to find you online, where can they find you?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn under Jill Knesek. I've also, I don't really do much on X or anything like that anymore. I used to be active, but I'm not so much anymore. But certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always very active there. And the blackline.com. We have a lot of smart people here. Our marketing team is great about getting us connected into interesting topics, and we're always looking to help help the community and help share some of the knowledge and expertise we have here. So yeah, happy to do
That's
that.
that's awesome. Jill, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it.